This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Happy Trails Meet the Candidate Forum. Please silence your phones if you have not done so yet. My name is Vicki Griffiths and I'm the chairperson of the election committee. I will be your moderator, assisted by our election committee members, Darla Gessler, stand up Darla, and she will be our timer. Marquetta McLean, she's our publicity chairperson, and Karen Stewart, our secretary. Karen will be going around and picking up questions, and her handsome husband just came in the door and he's going to take over for her. So you might want to hold your question so you can give it to him. We are assisted in our work by Mike Knights, operational manager, Amy Maxwell, and Marie Bachon, our board liaison. Our forum will be from 6 to 8. You were handed a packet of information on each candidate, whereas they shared a little bit about themselves and why they are running for the board and their qualifications. We have 7 candidates for the 3 openings on the board. They are, in alphabetical order, Jackie Adamson, raise your hand, Cindy Evans, Marla Fency, Barbara Fugerberg, Bill Rhodes, Gary Sale, and Ron Woodward. The rules for the procedure for this forum are as follows. Each candidate will have the opportunity to give up to 2-minute opening statement on their name and why they want to run for the board. Darla, our vice chairperson, will raise her hand when you have 30 seconds. So watch for Darla. Questions will be taken from those who were sent in as well as the write-in questions today. If you have a question, a card in your possession, and when you finish it, please raise your hand so that Karen's husband, Jim, can pick it up. All 7 candidates will answer the same question. No one question will be directed to just one person. We will begin in rotating fashion, so each will have the opportunity to answer the question. And we'll begin with Jackie Adamson, of course. No negative comments directed at residents or candidates, their personal life, their family, or any subject unrelated to the work of Happy Trails Community Association will not be allowed. Once a question is answered by each of the candidates, it will not be allowed to be repeated by someone else. We now will begin our introductions. So Jackie.
Good evening. I'm Jackie Adamson. I am from Wenatchee, Washington, and I've been here since June of 2022. I visited Happy Trails once. I went home. 3 months later, I packed up all of my belongings from a place I'd lived for 26 years and moved here. I'm a year-round resident, and I am currently involved in the singles group, arts and crafts, and the communication committee. I do have 9 years experience as an HOA president in Washington State. My experience includes working with property managers, contractors, homeowners, and fellow board members. With my experience, I will make a good board member. I want to work with results of the long range planning survey because you matter to me and I want to work with you. Would you please consider how you too can be a part of what's happening here. I believe the most pressing issues facing the board are communication, safety, and attention to the homeowners' issues and concerns. I am asking for your vote to the Happy Trails Board of Directors. Thank you.
Hello, there we go. Good evening, I'm Cindy Evans, and just double check a couple things. You have my bio, right? And you've had a chance to look at it. Good, because now we're going to go way away from it. You may know that I have a long history of working with volunteers and as a volunteer, most notably my time at the Chuck Wagon. My cooking is my true passion. So that's what got me into co-managing at the Chuck Wagon. Whole lot of managing, not so much cooking. But the end results were impressive. We paid back $18,500 in operating debt, and we put $13,000 in the bank for the resort. You may know that I'm a watercolor enthusiast, which led me to teaching watercolors. What you don't know is that I lettered in bowling in high school and took second place in state competition. I'm not sure how watercolors or bowling are going to help me with the board, but the results of my time running the Chuck Wagon and working with volunteers will. Thank you, Becky, who co-managed with me. Thank you, everyone who cooked, washed pots and pans, kept the place running. And thank you for considering me for your board of directors.
Hi, my name is Marla Festinice. I've been here since May of this year. I came from Prescott, Arizona. And I am extremely happy to be here. This is what I call my forever home. Now I'm going to read you a little something different than what my bio says on the paper. I didn't have a lot of room to write, so I'm just going to let you know. I've worked in a city, county, state, and federal levels in Arizona. All my positions or volunteer committee roles required knowing and applying the Arizona Revised Statutes. I enjoy educating team members on these laws. One of my most exciting volunteer positions was a fireman, volunteer, and in charge of all office tasks. I was then asked to run for the fire board, and I was honored to serve as chairman of the board of directors for the Williamson Valley Fire Department, and able to transition it from a volunteer department to an actual full running 24/7 fire department. It took a lot of work and a lot of time. I do see what needs to be upgraded or done in operations, and find the right people to put the plan in place and then action. In my position of deputy supervisor for Yavapai County, I was able to utilize all of my previous experiences from HOA and fire department boards and committees regarding hiring, firing, budgeting, accounting, grant writing, project planning, fundraising, website optimism, strategic planning, which I think is really important, facilities maintenance, planning, public relations, and more. My last adventure was I owned a business up in Prescott. I've also provided horse therapy for veterans, for disabled children, and incarcerated teens. I served as a caregiver and occupational therapist for critical care veterans in the VA. Okay, that's all I got.
Thank you for being here. I'm Barbara Fugelberg, and I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to serve on your board. I take this responsibility very seriously. I've worked alongside some great mentors who've helped me learn what it takes to become a good board member. I believe that you've seen that I do my homework. I listen so that I can understand your concerns and your comments, and that I treat all residents with respect. I work with fellow board members to collaborate, even when we don't agree on the specifics. An example of that is when we were trying to pass the asset improvement fee a number of years ago. I played a large role in that, in getting that approved. You voiced your concerns that it would become a slush fund, and I knew that we would not get it passed through the CC&Rs through your vote unless the board had a resolution. So I worked with the board to develop that resolution. That took a lot of negotiation. It took clarification, and it took compromise. The role I now play is to continue to assure that that resolution is followed and we know how those dollars are being spent. The most recent program that I've moved forward is the long-range planning process that was first discussed by Steve Deal, a current board member, and Kay Egley, a former board member. And I was committed to finding a consultant who would work with similar communities and have a process proven to be resident directed. We need this plan that's based on the residents' vision to assure our community remains viable. That's really the main reason that I'm running for the board. Feel that we've given birth to this process, and that the last time I said I hope it could graduate high school, but if I could at least get it into high school, I'd like that. We must remain committed to that so it's integrated in our decision-making and does not gather dust on the shelf. In closing, I bring knowledge of the past in terms of both successes as well as things we might have done different that would help the future board as we remain committed to serve the needs of the residents and maximize your investment in the community. I'd be grateful for your vote.
Good evening. I'm William Rhodes. I've been an owner in Happy Trails since 1997 and have lived here full-time since 2005. I'm originally from the Seattle, Washington area. My father and I had a construction company that did property development and speculative building, as well as contractual special projects in homes, schools, and churches. In 1980, I was hired by the city of Bellevue, Washington to be the superintendent of construction in the park department. And that took care of all of the beach piers, swimming areas, playgrounds, recreation facilities. We renovated and remodeled 21 of those facilities under my care. I was promoted as a project manager for a number of years in the city of Bellevue, and my last assignment was as a senior building inspector to modify how inspections were done in order to protect the city. I was on the board from 2013 until 2019, serving as the treasurer. I took time off to do some caretaking for my wife that had an Alzheimer's problem, and I would like to get involved in the work of the board today.
Good evening. I'm Gary Sell. I've lived in Arizona for 8 years and I moved to Happy Trails in June. I love Happy Trails. My superpower is common sense. At one point in my professional career, I was on the board of a small IT corporation. And at the end of one of our meetings, the CEO, Jay, pulled me aside and said, I appreciate the fact that you have the ability to shift through the hype and to sort out the BS, which is kind of my definition of common sense. I go into my notes here because I knew I couldn't do it in 2 minutes. My mission as your elected board of directors member will be to ensure common sense on your board of directors. My goal is to maintain and improve the amenities, the activities, and most important, the values of Happy Trail. Thank you. And I'm surprised I got that in 2 minutes. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm Ron Woodward, and I just want to take a second to say thank you to our elections committee, who always does a superb job of making these elections objective and as complete as they possibly can for you and for us. I've been in Happy Trails since 2018. My wife and I came down to Arizona for winters and spent most of the time in the Yuma area, and then discovered that there was a place where the wind didn't blow all the time and We settled here and have never gone back to Yuma. We're quite happy with Happy Trails. It is my nature to get involved in community service wherever I am. We lived in Virginia for 28 years, where I taught at the National Intelligence University. I was involved with 2 different homeowners associations there, serving as both the director and president of both of those associations. I was involved with a lot of club work in Washington, and I just have a heart for service. I was attracted to the board here a couple of years ago because I felt like there was an opportunity for work in the area of communication that's been mentioned several times. And I have served as liaison to the Chuck Wagon. I'm current liaison to the golf course. And there are many things here that are underway, and we need to get those completed. The current board is the most homogeneous group that I've been with in my entire life. And that tempers my desire to continue serving you on the board of directors.
Okay, our first question. Besides owning property in Happy Trails, do you also live here?
That's a great question. I moved here as a renter on May 23rd. On May 24th, I bought a home. I live here 12 months out of the year. I have no other home because for me, this is my home. I'm a year-round, fully committed resident and owner.
Happy Trails is our home. We may not be here 12 months out of the year, but this is our primary home. This is where we come for our medical care. This is where we come to be with our friends and family. We do go up to Show Low in the summertime, and we like to travel, but we are here in our home.
I am a full-time resident here, and as a matter of fact, I was looking at the house that Jackie bought. So she bought it right out from under me, so I ended up buying another home, and I am here 12 months out of the year, and I love it, and do not have any other home. This is my forever home right here in Happy Trails, and I wish to stay here and help.
I am a seasonal resident. I've owned in Happy Trails since 2003. I've been retired for the last 11 years. I am physically in Arizona 7 months out of the year. My husband and I lived in the Scottsdale area when he got out of college in the late 70s, and we enjoyed Arizona, just did not enjoy the wet underwear in the summer. So Seattle area is our primary home at this time, but I can assure you, for the 6 years that I've been on the board, even though I've only been here 7 months out of the year, I am a full-time board member that I continue to work for your community 12 months out of the year. In the Seattle area, I live in Kitsap County. I live out on 5 acres. I don't have a community. I consider Happy Trails my community where my friends are. Thank you.
My wife Marjorie and I, in 1993, both retired at the same time. We got in our motor home, having been in construction in the Seattle Puget Sound region with the drizzly skies and the gray overhanging clouds all the time. We decided to take a trip, and our first trip was to Key West. I wanted to go as far away from Seattle as I possibly could. During that travel, we were also looking for a future place to reside, to spend the rest of our life. We were looking for utopia, but we found out that doesn't exist. And like Ron, we spent time in Yuma, but couldn't stand the wind and the sand, and there was absolutely nothing to do there. I was invited to Happy Trails by the developer for an introduction to the resort, and within 3 days, we bought our property. This is my full-time residence, and it will be for the rest of my life.
Hi, yes, I have been a resident of Arizona for 8 years. And like I said earlier, I bought a place in Happy Trails in June. I tried the snowbird thing once, but I realized that going up to Minnesota, when they started predicting cold, I quickly decided that it's time to head south and sold everything in Minnesota. I have a son and 2 granddaughters up there, but no property and no real reason to go back except for a long weekend.
Yes. But let
Okay,
me say one thing and build off of what Barbara said, and that is, in this time, I'm not sure that question is as germane as it used to be, because Barbara chaired meetings during the summer from her home in Seattle, and she was every bit as effective as she would have been sitting right here in Happy Trails. So while it pays to have some of the directors on site during the summer, the residency is lower during the summer, and I don't think that should be a showstopper if a person is not a full-time resident here during the summer. But yes, we are full-time residents here.
Thank you. This is a really long one, so bear with me, okay? And we'll start with Cindy Evans on this when I get done. At a meeting in January, it was noted that we are on target to have over $100,000 in surplus in our coffers at the year end. If we stay on target to end up in the black, do you believe we should have our typical 6% dues increase or the cost of living assessment that has been discussed?
My understanding that while we are projecting a surplus in the operating budget, we are far below where we want to be and need to be in our reserves. So I think you have to balance those two things against one another. As to the increase, I don't know what will happen with that. I think a lot of it depends on what we project for a budget next year, what we're projecting for homeowners fees to be against that budget, and what we're projecting in the way of reserve spending. That's yep. Somebody will know more than I do.
So I'm just going to take it as, do we want an assessment or not? And right now, I would have to say no. If I were on the board or on the BGM committee, I would like to see a strategic plan. I know they've done the study, which involves all of the owners here. However, a strategic plan is completely different, which basically shows you the operating and the reserve, and exactly day by day is the operating, and the large projects are the reserve. So I would need to see more of an actual laid out 3 to 5 year plan that's actually that we can afford and how much we're going to have to. So if we do start getting money from you, that's just not going to go anywhere, that it's going to go to a specific area.
The Budget Committee is continuing to talk about this issue, and no decision has been made to this date. So I would encourage residents to continue to attend those Budget Committee meetings. The board has had conversations, brief conversations about this on what we feel we could possibly support. And I think that Cindy said it best in that there's our operating budget, of which we might have $100,000 excess in by the end of the year, but there's also our reserve budget. And that's a reserve budget that is significantly underfunded in the event that in order for us to pay for all the upkeep and maintenance and repairs and replacement of all of our buildings and all of our equipment, air conditioning units, our asphalt. It's a significant dollar amount. And we're currently around 40% funded. We should be 70% funded. So really the intent is to how can we, without raising dues significantly, we're limited by certain statute amounts that we can do that. How can we increase the amount that we're putting to our reserves so we can protect our property here and thus in all the common areas and all the amenities that we have so that we can protect your home values. So I think that it's going to be a difficult decision coming down the line. The conversations that I've heard from the budget committee, I've said to them, as long as they can justify it and tell us exactly where those dollars are going to go, we may be able to support it.
Vicki, I would like you to ask the question again, please, specifically.
See, anybody can do this.
I can't answer that one.
At a meeting in January, it was noted that we are on target to have over 100,000 surplus in our coffers at the year end. If we stay on target to end up in the black, do you believe we should have our typical 6% dues increase or the cost of living assessment that has been discussed?
Thank you, Vicki. The budget increase is controlled in the CC&Rs, capped at 6%. For a number of years, we didn't increase and we got a little bit behind the 8 ball. But for about the last 8 years, that 6% has been initiated. If we have a surplus, the logical placement of that money would be to put it in the reserve, and the board has that ability to do that. I think we just did $300,000 recently in order to help support that. We have other monies. The reserve fund itself also has some investments. They have strong investments in CDs that are controlled by the treasurer and management and the board. I think that Happy Trails should stick with the assessment of the CC&Rs at the 6% annually. The other index is entirely too complicated.
Well, I've always been a proponent of living within your means, but I'm also realistic, and I've, as we have all experienced some inflation recently, and in my own history, if I had money, I spent it. But I would say we have to have a budget. We have to stay within the budget. If we end up with a surplus, we should do something smart with it. If that means putting in the reserve, well, let's do that. I'm reminded of when, a couple of years ago, when my truck insurance skyrocketed. And I called the agent up right away and I said, what the heck is going on here? And she told me that the state of Arizona, they were allowed to increase the rates. So they did. And I said, okay, so the reason you're increasing it is because you can. And she said, yes. So I think we should be smart about how we handle the surplus. And if we do need an increase to make budget, then so be it.
I think this is a complicated question and sometimes difficult to understand. But if your operating fund gets too large, it gives the false impression that there is excess money there. There's never excess money. But if you roll it over into the reserves, then you can only use it for items that are in the reserves. So by taking the money and moving it into the reserves, you're compensating for those years that Barbara mentioned in which the rates were not raised at all. And we're trying to build that reserve fund back up to 60 or 70% from that 42% that we're sitting at now. And finally, the last thing about that is that, and Gary kind of began to hit on that, and that is, how do you begin to project out on those capital items that are in that reserve on what they're going to cost to replace them 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years from now? With what we've been through just in the last year, I hope you realize that your grocery bill went up and everybody else's did too. And if you hadn't put away some money to be able to afford the groceries, you would be living on other staples instead of being able to maintain your diet. So if we want to maintain this resort, maintain the buildings, the roofs, the roads, and all of the amenities we have, the pools, the decks around the pools and that, we must fund the reserves. And so I believe that it's false to think that you can ignore that and not consider raising to do that, to help with their operating fund and fund your reserves.
Thank you. This next question. Oh, I'm sorry.
I've been listening to the other answers, and my first thought was it might be time to look at the percentage of what goes where. That's a thought. 2 is a clear review of the budget. Did we overestimate or underestimate, and do adjustments need to be made? I've learned from 9 years of past experience as a homeowners president, a homeowners association president, the importance of the reserve and the reserve review audit. The numbers that they've been using about we're 40%, we should be at 60 or 70%. This is based on an audit. In Washington State, we were required to do an audit review every 2 years. And we had to hire a professional at over $2,000 to do this review to see where we were, to make sure that we were doing due diligence with the homeowner's money. So I think that is very important that we look at that. And number 3, I think, or excuse me, the last point I have is I know how important it is for you to educate yourselves on the budget, how the money is spent, where it goes. And you can do that by coming to the budget review committee meetings. I didn't know that those were open to the public for a little while. They are. You're welcome to come.
Thank you. Okay, next question is, and Marla, you'll be addressing this. Board members sign a code of ethics document and a social media document after they become a board member. Would you have a problem following it?
No, I would not. And we actually had to sign it to become candidates. So I do not have. As many boards as I've been on, it's not an easy job, but you do need to follow the rules. And sometimes rules are not followed. And if you let one go by, there will be another chance and then another chance. And eventually it's got stopped, because we're here to work for the community, the people. And if we start doing inappropriate, whatever it might be, I'm just a very large proponent person that believes in following the rules. And if I sign that, I give you my word that I will follow it and I will do the best I can for this community.
I've signed that many times, and I believe that 99% of the time I follow it. I'm pretty confident that I haven't been facetious here. It is something that I actually keep in my 3-ring binder that I take to meetings with me all the time as just a reminder for it. The code of conduct really is pretty simple. It means that we won't take money, we won't badmouth anybody, and that we will support each other, particularly if we make a decision on the board and we didn't necessarily agree with it, we will continue to follow that and not badmouth anybody else. As far as the social media policy goes, that's pretty easy to not follow. I'm not a person that's on Facebook. I have a Facebook account, but it's really for my sewing machines and that sort of stuff. I'm more into Pinterest. I do like some of the things my brother posts. My niece gives us a day-by-day blow of her child growing. Don't feel the need for that. So the thing about us as board members signing the social media policy, though, as those of you who are on it know that things can go south pretty quickly. And that sometimes things might be said about the board or any one of us in particular, and we might get a little hot and we might start engaging in that. And the intent is that we not do that. So since I don't necessarily engage in it frequently, it makes it easy. I am a reader of books by Louise Penny, who's written a number of things by Inspector Armand Gamache from the Sûreté of Montreal. And there's lots of murders in Three Pines. They're very interesting things, but Dr. Armand Gamache says for social media, you need to think of 3 things. Is it true? Is it kind? Does it need to be said? And I think that we would all live better if people thought of that before they posted on social media.
As a board member, I would commit to following the CC&Rs, the bylaws, and the code of conduct. And the code of conduct has some very specific things that would keep one from getting into trouble. I don't do anything on social media. I don't listen to rumors, and I don't spread gossip.
I enjoy social media, and many of my friends also do. That's one way that we communicate. I do recognize, and I would follow the guidelines, because as just Joe Blow down the street, as opposed to a board member, it's a totally different situation. But anybody who has followed anything that I've done on social media realize that I'm kind of a comic and I'm sarcastic. So I haven't done anything that I can recall that's negative. One post that I saw where somebody was unhappy with Happy Trails, I know my reply was a GIF that says somebody needs a hug.
Yes, I would follow the code of conduct. I've done my very best over the first 2 years I've been on the board, with some mentoring from Barbara. I had a couple of near misses early on, and we had some discussions. And as a result of that, I abandoned comments on social media. I would really like to see our residents take some kind of code of conduct for themselves. Because when you post things on social media that reflect poorly on Happy Trails, you undermine the confidence that we all have in this place where we live. We came here for a reason, and that reason is because we like the lifestyle, we like the people that are around us, and when we poison the well with our words, we make it difficult to live together.
Do I have any difficulty in following the code of conduct? No, I don't. As in all documents, all rules and regulations, there's always room for interpretation, semantics. You say potato, I say potato. Is it time, or when was the last time the code of conduct was reviewed? Are the expectations clear? Is it understandable by everyone? And is there an opportunity to ask questions to clarify anything that might be ambiguous? So I think we all need an opportunity to be sure that we truly understand the document that we're signing, be it code of conduct, a contract, a variance, whatever it is. I think we need to do due diligence in the knowledge that we have and make sure that we have the most information possible.
I have signed the code of conduct as a member of the communications committee and as a board applicant. I don't have an issue with signing it, and I don't believe that I have any issue with living up to it. I think it's simply a matter of doing what's right.
Okay. Next question for Barbara. We have seen more and more residents requesting variances for the rules they bought into. How do you feel about granting variances?
I was kind of hoping to be, is that your natural hair color? Yes. So it is true that when you buy into an HOA, there are rules and regulations, DRC guidelines, all sorts of things. But I think it is also that many people have never lived in an HOA before and don't understand that those rules are there for a reason. And so I think we need to do a better, figure out a way of really communicating what those rules are before people buy in. We also know that our residents are very creative and that they can see the rules, but they can see how they can be stretched to the limit. I believe personally that rules are rules and they should be followed. And that if the rule doesn't make sense any longer, we need to talk about it in a forum that affects the entire community, not just one. And that we're not making variances just for one person, one idea that they may have. So I like to really keep the variances to a minimum. And then at the same time, look at what's the reason behind that variance. And is it something that really as a community, we need to consider changing? I'm not for changing things willy-nilly. I think that there needs to be a process. I benefit by having a rule change. Before I came to this community, when I first bought in, we had a park model with an Arizona room, but the rules got changed, not because of me, but the rules got changed to allow snuggle wide. So now I have benefit from having a snuggle wide in here. So I do see that some rules are good and need to change, but we as persons only change them after it has been changed community-wide.
I'm a proponent of being very, very careful with variances. The process of a variance is a legal instrument whereby people can bring forward questions to see if there can be some adjustment to a rule. But the minute you begin to demonstrate a number of variances, it becomes the rule and it can become unmanageable.
I think that variances should be looked at because quite possibly it could be a good thing. But I do agree that variances, if they become common, then the rules change, and which is not necessarily a bad thing. If it was a bad rule, then it should change. But if it's a good rule, I don't see why we should have a variance.
Let me begin by saying I'm not a legalist. I don't follow things simply because there are rules, but I'm married to one. And she corrects my ways when I go astray. I come from the world of get her done. And remember Radar O'Reilly and MASH, who always said, don't ask how it got done. Well, in the military, we got things done and we didn't always say how we got it done. We got it done. And it was my motto was it's easier to get a forgiveness than it is permission. But I've learned a great deal about variances being on the board. And that is that, first of all, they should be done sparingly because the variances create more problems often than they solve. And they bring about other things that can make the situation far more challenging to resolve. But the other thing about variances that I've learned is that they will point you to the things in your rules and regulations and your guidelines that need to be reviewed. And so I would look at the variances and I would go to the guidelines and to the rules and say, is it clear? Is it germane? Does it need to be visited? Is it up to date? And I think in doing that, we can have consistency that we all seek.
So when it comes to variances, I think before I would say yes or no, I would want to make sure that we're being consistent in either saying yes or no. If there's a common question that is repeatedly requested for a variance, then the rules need to be reviewed and see if this is people's personal opinion or does this really make sense. And I also think that when there is a yes or a no to a variance, that the homeowner is thoroughly explained why that decision was made. The other thing is that, well, so-and-so did that. Well, you have to go back and look and see what the rules were when that person's variance was approved or not approved. I've seen homes, I was over at the Villas today, there was a change in the regulation about how far out to the property line you could go. At one time, it was one way and today it's different. So pointing at somebody else and saying, well, they got what they wanted doesn't necessarily mean that today you're going to get what you want. And if you understand that, I think people are more accepting of the answer. I've learned in experience that consistency and explanation is what keeps people happier.
There must be a secret to these. I don't know what. Anyhow, I stand by my answer from last week that when the exception becomes the rules cease to matter. That said, I will tell you that I am the baby here. And when I was reading through all of the hundreds of pages of stuff when I bought my home, I wasn't thinking about, well, my house has stairs, and what if I suddenly can't get up and down those stairs? Or I wasn't planning to have a little puppy who might want a yard or any of those things. So I think that life continues to evolve, things change, and I think it changes what we want. But at the same time, the rules are there to protect our community.
Now for myself, my husband and I have always had a home that was in an HOA. To me, I look at it now as more of a protection, not just for myself, but for everybody. If you read the CC&Rs, it affects all of your neighbors. So as far as variances, I have to agree with some of the folks up here that it really depends on what it is and how many, because once again, like Cindy, sorry, I want to call her Carol. Carol must be thinking of me or something. But exceptions, exactly what she said. I have to agree with you fully. Although I am fully for HOAs. So variances, depending on what it is, and that's something that the board actually has to look at, go out, look at, and see how it will affect the community and others.
Okay, next question, and Bill, this is for you. What benefits and negatives do you see with the proposed electronic keys?
Vicky, I can't hear you.
What benefits and negatives do you see with the proposed electronic keys?
I've been a proponent for a long time through BGM for having the implementation of an electronic card access to our facilities. And there's a number of reasons for that. Essentially, with an electronic card key, you can control who gets access to what facilities, and and it controls outsiders not using our facilities. We ran this through BGM a number of years ago. I don't know why it died, but I think it's being discussed again, and I think it's something that we really need.
I'm not familiar with the need. I certainly wouldn't oppose it if it's cost effective and we can budget for it. I guess that's it. I would not be opposed to it at all.
I believe that it's time for us to begin moving in that direction, that we have a number of people that use the facilities that are not authorized to use the facilities. And we had some problems over the summer a couple of times. And I think that some of those things would be resolved by the keying system. It does involve a significant amount of outlay as far as getting the thing in place. But once it is in place, and as you are well aware, if you've been here any time at all, we had a problem with dumping down at our dumpsters when they were full, dumping things on the ground and that sort of thing. What keying would tell you is when people entered the facility and when they left, and it would give you a better roadmap to knowing who was there and leaving these things behind. And if the facility was locked and you had a key to get in there, it would also prevent people from outside the resort coming in and using those things. We pay a lot of money for dumping the garbage around here, and that's just one example. But the pools and parties at the pools and that sort of stuff, and all of it, I think it's time to consider moving to a keying system.
I experienced this at a condominium complex. And the first thing we had to do was to investigate the need to the cost. Where would the keypad, well, we chose to use keypads. Many of the doors here at around the town center already have keypads. So that's the way we went. It monitored who came at what time. It solved a lot of problems with those who were not using the facility correctly, especially at the swimming pool. Where would these keypads or electronic keys be placed? Are those where we need it most? It sounds like we need it more at the pools and the garbage than we do anywhere else. Let's take this to HomeCo. What do they know before we start looking at money and which way to go and talking about electronic keypads? Let's talk to HomeCo. What have other communities like ours done to curb this inappropriate use of our facility? That's what I think.
I think there are a lot of benefits to be had from a key. Hello. Hello up. Does it have touchpad in there? It's got a keypad, yep. Okay, so I think there are a lot of benefits to be had from a passkey system. However, they come at a price. They're not cheap. And technology is great until it isn't. And the day that the system that controls the passkey breaks down will be an ugly day. But overall, I think that there are probably a lot of benefits to be had for all the reasons you've heard.
There are benefits and negatives, and it's going to cost. Because anything electrical is going to cost, and then you're going to have to worry about the upkeep. And there are people that don't live here, but they are owners, so I would assume they have the right to come in and use the property. I did look up online today on other HOAs, and a lot of them charge extra for a key for the homeowner and extra for a guest. So, but still, once again, I'm going to go back to my little strategic plan because I think it all needs to be laid out, because you're going to have to look at that at eventually being not just putting it in and using it. You're going to have to look at the cost. What's going to be the cost of the cards? What's going to be the cost if it gets lost? If somebody else takes it? I mean, there's so many other areas in which to look at. It's not just really a yes or no. That's going to have to be looked at before done.
Thank you. It is a very complicated question here, in that I am a proponent of having them. I think most of us in our careers had a key card system in order to get access to the buildings that we worked in for a lot of security reasons. I believe that it is something that could potentially help protect our assets that we have and know the amount that any particular room is being used. But it is a significant cost. And at first, what we would have to do is really define what's the scope of what we'd be looking at. Would we be looking at having key card access on every single one of these doors that's in here? That's going to be expensive. Or what doors do we have to have it on? We know that the city of, or really the health agency that governs the pools, managing the pools, is going to be telling us at some point in time that we will have to have key card access to our pools, really for protection of children coming in. So we know at least that. But really is we'd have to define what's the scope of every spot that we would want a key card on. And from that, identify the various vendors who can do it. And as they said, technology changes. So currently we've got gates outside. We have the transponder on our cars. If we use the current vendor that we have, who makes our gates that we have now going out Roy Rogers and Walgreens, and we integrate a system, a key card within that, but then we change vendors, will our new key card system still work? So there's a lot of thought that has to go into it. I do think it's something that we need to look at in protecting our assets and access to our amenities. But I think we're going to be shocked at the dollar that it's going to cost us.
Okay, next one. This is for you, Gary. As I see more and more year-round rentals, I am concerned for the future of Happy Trails. What is your opinion on limiting rentals to 9 months per year?
Wow, I know there's a lot of rentals, and I have no real opposition to that. I have never done that. I am an owner. I would say that you have to look at each incident or each opportunity individually. I don't know that a blanket pro or con rental would be any good. And there's an awful lot of rentals here. So I think it would be tough to get a majority to change the rules.
I want to hearken back to what drew many of us here, and that was what we saw as a lifestyle whether we had been travelers and were now coming to a place to rest and find a year-round environment in which we could still engage with fellow travelers, or with whether we're active travelers coming in here for 5 or 6 months of winter and hitting the road again. Whether you agree or not, I believe that our lifestyle here is an open lifestyle that often people who have not been RVers cannot understand. And when they come into this environment for purposes of just being the cheapest place to rent, they often don't engage in the clubs and the activities that we have here. And as a result, they are no different than the people in traditions who drive into their garage, close their door, go into their house, and never interact with their neighbors. So with regard to the issue of rentals, I think it depends on the individuals who are renting, but I would like to see us keep control of the percentage of rentals and set a level and try not to exceed that level. On the same token, I'd be very, very interested in trying to control very short-term rentals because we've got things like the Super Bowl and stuff like that coming up where we could get a lot of really rowdy individuals in here who could break things.
Again, there's more than one answer to the question. My answer is, I think there should be no limit on the length of time that someone can rent. If they want to rent 6 months or a year and renew for a year and renew for a year, why not? The owner's not living there. They must conform to the rules and regulations. We should hold the homeowner, the actual owner, accountable for who they have in there as renters. That means then we also need to implement good follow-up on complaints if there are any. It would be difficult for those who use this rental to limit them for 9 months. The turnover would be much greater. Because as I understand, 9 months, and then you have to move out. You don't get to renew for 9 months. I don't understand or know what's been set, if there's any rules or guidelines on that, but now we have a very large turnover. I know that from experience that there's good renters and there's renters who don't really care about the property. There's owners who do and owners who don't. I don't think there should be a length limit.
I think it's going to be a very complex issue. You have people who own who are currently renting. Are we changing the rules on these folks midstream? How do we deal with that? How do we deal with the short-term renters? I agree with the fact that if you're renting your property, you should be following the rules. I don't think that's always happening. And I think the concern is, will we just become a trailer park? So I think if we've got people in here who do follow rules, owners who are careful about how they're renting and the ages that they're renting and all of the concerns we have, then maybe it's not a good thing to limit. I just think it's going to be a very complex issue, and we're going to be addressing a number of scenarios, and we're going to make somebody unhappy.
As far as rentals go, being on the ad hoc committee for such a short time that we had it going, I really wish it would have continued to go on even if we just continued to talk. I'm not really for just 9 months. I know a lot of people that are renting here and they don't have anywhere else to go. and they're very good and they love their community and they are part of the community. And if somebody is willing to rent to them, I'm not somebody who would do such a thing. I do not want to be a renter, so, but I think that they should be able to live here. The only thing that concerns me is the shorter terms, days. There should be a minimum. I was told when I came in to rent that there was a minimum by the lady that I rented from. And she went through everything and I had to sign. And if I hadn't rented, I would not have found my home. But I am not for a limit. I realized that years ago that this was more of the summer people took off. But unfortunately now we're getting a lot of people that are living here year round, and I'm one of them. And we have to accommodate everybody if we're going to live here. And so that's about where I stand. I'd like to have another committee on that.
One of the issues that we have to constantly think about is when we did all buy in here, we bought in with the set of CCNRs with the understanding that that's what the rules were when we bought in, with the understanding that those rules could potentially change. Now, I've been in the seat of been a landlord. I inherited a piece of property from my parents when they passed. And I intended it to be a short-term rental. And I found some very good renters. But then we also find the situation where some of us at our age group have heart attacks. Some people have strokes. Some people need to have their hip replaced. And then they need to cancel the rental agreement that they had. So it was really difficult to get a renter, consistent renter in there enough times out of the year that I could even make a profit. For the most part, I just broke even. I kept the property a lot, mostly because it was reminded me of my parents. So what I see a lot of people who have rental properties have turned them into year-round rentals because it is easier to keep them rented year-round than having to constantly work on getting a new renter in there. The downside is, though, is that we were started as a community, as a resort, where there were a lot of seasonal people here, and particularly the Canadians. They're only allowed to be here 180 days out of the year. Many of them are owners, but a lot of those are renters, mostly because of the exchange rate. And so what I've seen as we've had more and more long-term rentals, there are fewer short-term rentals. Short-term, I mean by for the season, available to a lot of residents. And I think those residents could potentially become owners. So I think we've missed the boat in that we probably should have had a rule 2005 when we turned over from the developer that limited the rentals at that time.
I think when you try to get into controlling how people manage their property, whether they rent them or whether they're owner-occupied properties, you're stepping into some real quicksand. A person is perfectly entitled to rent their property to anyone as long as they're qualified by age or whatever other guidelines you have established. I think it would be really advisable if we begin to talk about controlling rentals, that we kind of let other communities like Tempe, what they're going through right now with the party time occupancies of properties, and kind of use them as tools for us to look to going into the future.
Sorry. Okay, next question, and this will be for Ron to start out on. I am an owner in the villas and love the friendly community vibe. Since we are not represented on the board and are a minority of owners, would you each make a statement as to whether you'll be supportive, attentive, and be a voice for villa owners?
Absolutely, unequivocally, I have several friends who live in the villas, and I would say that I have an interest in your problems that you have, and I go over there to try and understand the situation before making a decision. I care about you just as much as I care about anybody else, and don't feel like an orphan, because some people in the Happy Trails Resort don't know that the ranch is part of Happy Trails. And one time I brought my dog up to the dog park and they said, are you supposed to be using the off-leash park because you're not part of Happy Trails? And I said, I am part of Happy Trails. And they said, but you live in the ranch. And I said, yes, that's part of Happy Trails. So being treated like an orphan is a very frustrating situation. And I believe one of the very highest priorities should be coming up with a master plan for the people in the villas. And it has to be something that includes them. I don't understand why we don't have a representative on the board from the villas, because they're not so old they can't still serve on the board. I'm looking at a couple of them right now. But yes, you have my support.
I was thinking about what I was going to say. I went to the villas today, and what a great place to live. It's a different look, but that doesn't make them and people who don't live in the villas us. And so that's something that since I first visited, I didn't understand the us and them attitude. So that's one thing I'd like to get cleared up. I was really surprised to find out that there was from what I understand, no designated board liaison to the villas. And I think that is something that needs to be changed. They may not be represented as much as they feel they should. I don't know why not. The other thing is, if you live in the villas, are you volunteering on committees? And are you active in attending the budget committee, the design review committee, the buildings and ground maintenance committees? Are you involved in the rest of the community as well? So I would put that to you and say, make sure you're involved and that your voice is being heard.
An owner is an owner is an owner. Whether you are in the villas or in the ranch or in the greater rest of Happy Trails, you all have unique challenges. Different communities, even in the greater portion of Happy Trails, have different challenges, different needs. Some sections are older, some sections are newer, some sections have bigger lots. So I think there's always unique challenges to be addressed, and the villas are one. But you're still an owner and you deserve our support and our recognition.
And I would say, yes, I would support the villas, just like I would support the ranch, just like I support every other one. I actually looked in the villas when I was looking for a house to buy. You know, I really would have liked to have seen somebody actually from the villas up here. And as Jackie said, it would be nice to see people from each, I don't know if you want to call them group or sections, to be somehow involved with the board, so they could be their own liaison to let people know what exactly is going on and what the needs might be, so you can bring it to their attention or our attention. So yes, you are a member of the community.
I've had the privilege of going over to some of the Villa Saturday meetings that they have. I believe it's the first Saturday of the month. A couple of board members and I have gone over there when there's been an issue that we need to talk to them about or get their input. One in particular was when there was a change in now allowing those units to be stuccoed because there was a different stucco product that could be used on them and got their input. And I do acknowledge that it is a very unique community within our entire community. Just the way that it's physically set up helps facilitate that. And it is something that sure would be nice if they had thought about that when they implemented the rest of the community. One of the things that I think that we benefited from was that for a while there was actually a member of the DRC committee who represented the villas, and that person left the committee. Their term was up. I really would like to see another villa member sitting on that committee and helping make the changes. When we first got back this season, there were some questions from the villas. Well, it came up at a We're Listening session when we had denied some variances. Then at the next We're Listening session, a couple of villa members were there. And we talked about it. And as a result of that, I asked our new general manager, Darlene, and Mike Nice to go over and meet with them to find out what their concerns are and bring that back to us. So I really do believe that they are a community that we need to listen to. And I've actively been involved in trying to do that.
In my 27 years of being in Happy Trails, I've never thought of the villas as not being a part of the total chemistry of this resort. There's lifestyle is the same. There are human beings. Everything is the same as the rest of us throughout the resort. Right now, there's a real strong movement through DRC to include conversation with the people in the villas, trying to come to a recognition of what they want to be, where they want to go, and so forth, so that they can have a lifestyle that they really appreciate. I think that we should support that very, very strongly. I've worked on guidelines for the villas for many times. I've been involved with DRC since 1998, and there have been numerous modifications and upgrades to allow people to improve their properties and to enhance their lifestyle.
Well, until very recently, I wasn't aware that there was a difference. I thought we were all the same. There's pink ones and there's blue ones and there's yellow ones, but we're all the same. I'm certain that from a construction standpoint, they may have separate issues. And I would certainly, as your board member, I would certainly listen to those specific requirements or concerns.
Okay, starting back with Jackie. Our rules are in most cases very clear. Our enforcement is not consistent. What would you do as a board member to do a better job of ensuring the rules are enforced or changed if not enforced?
That's one of my hot buttons. I'm all for follow-up on issues, concerns, complaints. I've heard different explanations as to how that's been done. Some complaints are handled right away. Other rules and regulations are left unattended. This is what I've heard. And it's important that, again, the board is consistent. We don't have all the answers, whether you've been on the board for 2 years, 5 years, or not at all. I think we need to take some of these issues back to HomeCo and ask them for their help. That's what they're here for. How can we do it? How can we enforce one rule and not the other? There's a rule in there that you should do one thing, and it doesn't make any sense to do that. So we need to look at the rules and regulations and see what might need to be changed. And we also need to look at the complaints and make sure that they're valid. That's one thing I'm striving for, is to get down, dig in, and find out what we can do and how it can work.
Compliance on a day-to-day basis is really the responsibility of our staff. The staff. The day-to-day stuff with compliance really comes to the staff. And there's a process in place for dealing with compliance. We had quite a lively debate on our patio the other night, talking about the issue of compliance. And what do you do? How far do you go? How much do you spend to enforce that piece of enforce the compliance? Do you spend outrageous sums of money on legal fees to deal with it? Is it worth it? It just, like all other issues, it becomes very complex. What's really important? How do you work with the homeowner? Can we resolve the issue without getting into legal issues? It's not a blanket answer. There's not a one size fits all here, unfortunately. I think we do the very best we can do to keep our resort looking nice and being a place where our property values are upheld and where we want to live. And we try and do that within reason.
Well, we do have rules. We do have the CCNRs and rules and regulations, and compliance also is a part of everybody that's in here and that lives here. So if you do see something that's incorrect or that is a violation, that is something that the board can't see. You actually need to turn it in. And I have a few friends that have seen things, yeah, but they said, no, they're not going to turn it in. So there's not much I can do about that. Mine went blank. But to be enforced, I know that now, when I first moved here, we didn't have much of a staff. And HomeCo has now provided us with more of a staff. So I'm hoping to see that there will be more done. And I know that we have one young lady that's going to be working on compliances. So who goes out to see them? I'm going to guess it's probably the DRC working with this young lady. And so it all begins there, and hopefully the longer we leave somebody doing something they shouldn't do, it's going to be harder to stop somebody. So it's up to everybody here to voice their opinion. And now we've got people from HomeCo to really take care of it.
So this is an age-old problem, it seems. As far as the rules, we are actually looking at the rules of what things need to be changed from a legal perspective. There was something recently in this last legislation that came down about specifically related to flags, and which ones we must allow and which ones we can prohibit. So we're taking a look at all of the rules and regs, and particularly whether they're enforceable. And if they're not enforceable, it's why do we need it? And there might be some things in our rules. One of the board members pointed out to me that we have things about clotheslines and it's repetitious, and maybe that particular thing needs to be taken out. But I do want to assure the residents that our compliance staff, for at least the last 3 years, has been very diligent about going around and making notations to residents and sending them letters about when they're out of compliance. And I know that they've been doing that. But what I think that what we need is a way of asking you, what is it that you would need to be confident that enforcement occurs? When they send a letter to a resident, the rest of us are not going to know about it. I might know about it if it becomes a fine that the person hasn't paid, and I see it on that report. But for the most part, I don't know all of the letters that went out, the reasons that they went out, and how many of them they got in compliance. So I think I'd like to know more from the residents, you all, as to what types of things you would need as a report on a regular basis that would tell you that enforcement occurs. So really, that's what, I know that compliance is doing their job of going around and checking things based on the rules, and letters are being sent to residents.
My experience with compliance in harmony with DRC compliance officer, they're very concerned about the conditions of our properties and the following of the rules that we do have. This is really a partnership. This is a partnership between the homeowners and the management for people to see to it that compliance is managed. The compliance officer that we had that just recently got promoted used a tool that I think was extremely successful, and that was diplomacy. You don't beat up on people, because if you do, they're going to resist.
I liked your answer. Enforcement, I don't have any experience here at Happy Trails, but in other instances, I've had some experiences. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes the rules are broken because they don't know what the rules are. I think before we start strong arming and enforcing or finding things, we should make absolutely certain that the rules are clear. Now, some people won't follow them just because that's who they are, and that's where enforcement is. But in my experience, people that understand the rules will say, oh, yeah, sorry, and life goes on.
I believe there's a number of issues here, and to say that the rules are quite clear, I don't think it's totally accurate, because I know in places where the rules are not quite clear, particularly as time moves along and younger people bring their toys with them, we have to go back and revisit the things that are not allowed in Happy Trails. We dealt with ATVs for years, and now we're at UTVs, and UTVs are licensed vehicles. They're noisy, they run up and down. Some people use them as their golf cart to run up to the mailbox and that sort of thing. It's a lifestyle thing, and I think that we have to adjust to it. The second thing is that compliance can be an issue, and if you're not enforcing the rules, then the perception is that there is no rule and that it's allowed. The third thing is you've got to look at the fines and see whether the fines are realistic. If you're going to fine somebody $50 for having a Class B in their driveway because it's not long enough to qualify for our 24-foot limit to be in the resort, storing that vehicle is going to cost more than $50 in most places. So the person is going to pay the $50 and store it in their driveway and continue to create problems for everyone because they perceive that somebody's breaking the rules or the rules have changed and they haven't been notified. So it's a big issue. We need to keep visiting our rules and make sure they are germane and enforceable.
Thank you. Okay, we only have time for 2 more questions and then we'll be adjourning. If you could change one thing at Happy Trails, what would that be?
That's me. One thing. I think for me personally, if I could change one thing, I would want to see there be better communication between the board and the residents. I can go online and I can find the minutes and I can read them and they'll tell me that a motion was put before the board and it passed or failed. If I can't be at that board meeting, I have no context for that discussion. There's so much that goes on outside of the board meeting that they're working on that I think a lot of times we don't even know what it is. So I'd love to see there be some vehicle of communication that would give us a summary on a semi-regular basis of what is the board doing. Because I think when we don't have that communication, that's when we have all kinds of conversations going on that may not be accurate. And rumors get started and it all melts down. So I think we just need to talk to one another.
One thing that's kind of hard, there's a few things. Other than that, Happy Trails is just a beautiful place, but I'm going to have to also say communication. Without communication from the board to the people to the board, without the board listening to the people, and I don't mean just on surveys, I mean verbally in person. It's a big thing to me. I have always been open and my door is open to anybody that ever wants to talk or has to discuss something. Then there's a few other things after that, but if I'm gonna have to pick the number one, I'd like to see, because our office staff now works wonderfully with us, and I miss Mike doing what he did, but we have another young man, Bradley, that's doing a fabulous job. But I'd like to see, better communication. Helps.
I'm really hoping that this whole issue of communication is something that is really going to be coming out of the long-range planning process. And I believe that it will, because I really think that what we need is a real clear understanding of how residents want to get their communication, what times they want, what things they want to be informed about. We all know that there are a number of people who really are not engaged at all in the community, and they're just sleeping in their house, going to the pool, going back to their house. Maybe some of them might be going to work, but then there are a number of you who are really engaged in wanting to know what's going on. And I know that the board really has worked, we'll get a little defensive here, in trying to improve communication, and particularly the vehicle of the We're Listening sessions is one opportunity for you to really sit down with the board in a very relaxed setting to be able to get your questions answered. And we've gotten really good feedback on that. But I really think that this long-range planning process, as it gets into the work group, will really be able to define the specifics on how you as a community want to receive your communication and how to receive that. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I also encourage you to be active participants in participating in meetings. We've been holding virtual meetings ever since COVID came along, in all the committee meetings. And there are a lot of opportunities for you to learn what's going on. We as a board do take responsibility, and that we have a responsibility in getting that information out to you.
Barbara touched on the one thing that I would like to see changed. Prior to COVID and prior to the virtual meetings, the board meetings always had a workshop on the Monday before the Thursday board meeting. I would like to see that be re-implemented, because it gave an opportunity for people in the audience to voice their questions to the board. And it gave the board members an opportunity of 3 or 4 days to digest those comments before they voted on making a decision.
I think the only observation that I've made in the past 7 months is, and it came up in the last meeting that we had, there were several issues concerning traffic, speed limit signs, stop signs, and such. just the other day, a good example was when the gate was broken again on the Roy Rogers gate, the entrance. It occurred to me that over the past 30 years that nobody thought of putting a stop sign before you get to that the gate. I've seen two cars go through with one opening, and they probably do it because nobody told them that they couldn't do it. So again, I think the only situations that I've had any issue with is on the roads, and as we had discussed the last meeting, the signage. I never realized that, but after it was mentioned, I checked, and yeah, we only have one speed limit sign, I believe. And if you miss that one, you have no idea, a visitor has no idea what the speed limit is.
Well, this is an interesting topic, and as I said a couple of years ago, the reason that I ran for the board initially was because I felt the communications were lacking. I've seen them improve greatly over where they were 2 years ago. That doesn't mean we don't still have a ways to go to get to where we need to be. I'm going to use a friend as an example, and I'm not going to use his name because he's here and he'll jump out of his chair. But he was going to do something else tonight with another friend who's also here. And I said, why don't you come to the Meet the Candidates session? And he said, the what? I haven't heard about that. And I said, do you get NeighborNet? Oh yeah, I get NeighborNet, but I haven't really read it. And if you remember the survey results that we got, people said they were uninformed, but an equal number said they don't go to any of the board meetings. The board meetings are virtual. You can attend them from home if you have a computer or an iPad or any of the other technology. They're taped. You can go back and look at them. You can read the minutes. Yeah, we still have challenges to go, but we've made a lot of progress, and I compliment the Communications Committee for the steps that they've made over the last couple of years. But I think communications will continue to be a challenge, and it takes all of us to make it work.
My point is the same one, communication. Not that it's not out there, but is it going out in a manner that reaches everyone? People have a different way of receiving communication. Some people hear, some people read, some people look at pictures. And I think that some of those ways of getting the word out is not meeting the need of the recipient. My husband was a broadcast journalist with a background in political science, and communication was his entire life. I learned from that as well. I worked in radio advertisement sales, and the first time I had to write a radio ad was unbelievable because you don't hear and speak the same way you read. When I got here and found out that there was an opening on the communication committee, that was the first committee I joined. And I'm sitting in a room of communicators, and we talk about different ways to reach every single person here at Happy Trails. The long range planning survey also indicated how people want to receive information. So I think it's important that we get the message out in more than one way. And I think it's important that people know what's coming up so that they know why they should come to a meeting, and explanations if needed when the communication is made.
With that, I think that a lot of you guys are probably getting kind of tired. I know it's getting to be that time, right? I'd like to be at home in my pajamas too. But anyway, I want to thank you for answering all these questions. There are more questions than we had time for. However, we have decided that we're going to turn those questions over to probably Barbara, and because we feel like they would be good to address at the We're Listening sessions. Since you did ask them, I think that they should be viewed, okay, and answered. I want to also remind you that this Friday is when the ballots are all going to be in your mailboxes if you have turned in the homeowner arrival form. If we do not have your current address as being at Happy Trails, it will be sent to your home address. So if you have not changed that in the office, in the library, fill this out and give it to the library, the gal at the library, then it'll be going to your home address. There will be extras in the library that you can pick up. It'll be an envelope with the ballot. The ballot will be inside along with the annual meeting announcement and also the return envelope. Now, I want you to be really diligent at paying attention to this because some are not even counted because they have not filled out the envelope correctly. So be sure you print your name, like it says, lot number, and sign it. And then put this with the ballot, which is a blue sheet, and you'll put that in the ballot box, which it will be located in the library. It's all under lock and key, so don't worry about somebody stealing your ballots. This is due, the due date on this is February the 16th, Thursday, February 16th. And on the e-blast that you see each week that Mike is putting out, and Thelma and Joy, it tells you and reminds you about this. So as soon as you get it, you've attended this, you've heard the answers, and so I'm sure that you already have formed your idea of who you want to vote for. But be sure you do it correctly so that we can count it. Each year, we really press upon people to do it correctly, and each year we seem to be getting less and less that are invalid. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you for coming, and thank you again to the candidates for their time, and we appreciate you. Thank you.